Welcome to day 6 of the 12 days of Christmas. I'm putting out a new drawing every 2 days from now until Christmas, so don't miss out on any of this fabulous holiday content. Today we're doing this beautiful red cardinal in pastels. I'm using Carbothello, I'm using the Kohinoor Gioconda pencils, and I'm using the Faber-Castell Pitt pastels, as well as some pan pastels for this project. So I've taken my sketch and I've put white pan pastel on the back of it, and now I'm just going over it with a pencil, which is going to leave a very faint white charcoal mark on my pastel mat paper. So now I'm going to start by going into my background, and I'm just going to map out or color map all my little areas. I spent a lot of time on the background of this because it has some things in the foreground and things in the distance. The things in the distance I want to make a little more blurry so that the focus is on the bird and the branch that the bird is sitting on. So I'm just going in and adding some pastel to that background. I'm leaving out where my branches are going to be for now, but I'm just trying to give myself a good roadmap for the rest of the piece so I don't get too lost. The chalk outline that went down is very light. I know it's hard to see on camera, but basically it's just giving me my basic shape of the bird, where the eye is, the beak is, and where those feathers are, so that when I start going in with my colors, I know exactly where I'm going. So the goal right now is to just get some pastel down on the paper and kind of map where my tonal changes are. So I'm going in and just giving the bird a nice red coloring all over. It's a lot easier to blend pastels when you have a nice base layer down already on the paper, but we're just going to go in and add some deeper, darker shadows and just kind of color map. We're not putting any details in right now, so your pencils don't need to be super sharp. The pencils should be sharp for your last layers, which are going to be your feathers and all of that detail work that you're going to put down. But right now we're just giving us a good first coat of color where everything is going to be, and then we're going to expand upon that as we go along. I'm going into my branches now. I'm going to be adding some grays and some tans, and like I said, we're just putting our first layers down so that we can put our details on top when we're ready. But get that first layer down, it'll be a lot easier to blend as we go along once you have a good little coat down. Now you don't want to lose your drawing, so that's why I haven't covered the complete bird in red yet, because there's going to be some lighter tones, and I like to keep things that are going to be lighter. I like to keep kind of light from the beginning. I don't want to muddy them up with a lot of color right off the bat. The beauty of the pastel mat paper is it has a really heavy tooth to it, so you can put a ton of layers on top and not worry too much about ruining the tooth of the paper. Now with pastel, it can get filled up pretty fast if you're not blending in between. So I do suggest blending a little bit in between. You'll see I go in with my hand and I'm kind of blurring out some of those background branches that are going to be more blurry, and we're just kind of getting a good roadmap going on, and then we're going to start to go in with our details little by little as we get a little farther along. So each different brand of pencils acts a little bit different. The Carbothello pencils, you can get a really sharp point for fine details. It is a little bit of a medium hardness. The Gioconda from Kohinoor pencils are very soft, so you can get a lot of color down really quickly. And then I have the Faber-Castell Pitt pastel pencils, which are much firmer of a point than the other two. So you can get a lot of details, but you have to be careful. You don't want to scratch the paper. You don't want to push too hard on those harder pastels, those Pitt pastels. So I like to go in with the Carbothello and the Koh-i-Noors first, and then go in with the Pit Pastels. Now it's all sometimes about color as well, which set has the better color that you're looking for. In this case, we're just using a bunch of different reds, some blacks, some grays, and some tans. I always sample out more pencils than I think I'm going to use, and I prepare everything ahead of time before I even get started drawing. So all my pencils are sharpened and ready to go. And like I said, you don't need sharp pencils until the end, but I like to have a fairly decent point to start with. And that way you're not rubbing the wood of the pencil onto that paper and kind of scratching that pastel mat. Pastels are a quicker medium than colored pencil, but they work really well together. So you could use your colored pencils with your pastels, especially on this pastel matte paper, because it will just lend itself to both mediums really well. In this particular drawing, I'm only using the pastels, but in the end, if you want to add some more details with some nice sharp colored pencils, you can add that on and it would look a lot more detailed and really beautiful if you prefer to do that. But in this exercise, we're just using the pastel pencils and trying to get a good realistic finished drawing with just those pencils. So the beauty of pastels and color pencils and pretty much any medium that you're going to do, the more layers you put on, the better it looks. You want to have some depth and some form to this bird, so you want to make sure that you have a nice underpainting, and then you're putting other colors on top and blending those together. This will help with the realism of the piece, and it will also really make it pop as you go along. So we're just going to build up slowly and gradually like we do with everything, and just, we're going to start to add in our details now. So you see I'm going in and I'm going to define some of those feathers, and on the cardinals some of those feathers are kind of have a grayish color, so we're adding a little bit of that in, but I'm going to do it slowly because I don't want to muddy up the beautiful red of the bird. So just put a little bit of that in and just define those feather areas, and then we're going to go back on top with some more detailing. Now, usually when I'm doing a piece like this, I always like to finish the background before I get into the details of the piece. In this case, I put down this light blue to start with, and I found that it was a little anemic looking, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to reinforce that. But now, because I've put down some of those branches and things, I kind of have to go around everything. So it's really helpful if you can get your background down first, and then you won't have to go around everything to try to change that value. But whatever works for you guys. In this case, we're using these pencils. It's fairly easy to go around everything, and I want to make some of those branches look kind of blurry anyway, so that will all get blended in together, and it will be just fine. But it is a lot easier if you do the background first and kind of finish that background and then go in with the branch and the bird. I just found that color just didn't have enough pop for me, so I'm just adjusting as I go with a little bit more blue and a little bit more white to brighten up some areas. Native American tribes believed that the cardinals were good omens. They believed that they could predict the weather, the lightning, and the rain with the sight of these birds. But in more recent days, I think most people believe that when they see a cardinal, it's a sign from someone that they've lost in their life and that they're coming to visit. So now that we've adjusted that background, we're going to go in and we're going to really start to pop our details. So I'm going into all those branches, making sure that I'm paying attention to where my light source is so that I know where the shadows of things are going to be and where those highlights are going to be. Now the background, you're going to blur out so that pushes that farther back, and the branch that the bird is sitting on is going to be very in focus. So that's going to have the most detail. Just keep referring back to your reference image and then just take a peek at the things that are in front. Are they lighter or darker than the things behind? And this value will help you determine, what is going to be farther away and what's going to be closer. So just refer back to that reference image and just tweak your values and make sure you have that somewhat correct. Now, I didn't want to muddy up the bird. I'm not going to make it as gray in those feathers on the back as our reference image, and you can feel free to change things as you like. I just felt like I wanted to keep it nice and bright and beautiful, and I'm not going to muddy that up and make it as gray as my reference image. And you can make it your own, so you decide what you like. You can do it exactly the way your reference image looks, or you can change it up just a little bit. As long as your values are correct, your drawing will still be really believable when you're done. My reference image today is a Creative Commons picture, Wikimedia Commons, so it's free to use, distribute, change, adapt, whatever, and you can find this if you Google Cardinals. You can find this exact picture under Wikimedia. So this way, if you want to draw along with me, you'll have the reference photo, and I'll put that in the description box below the video as well, so you guys can draw along with me. And if you do draw along with me, I'd love to see your work. If you use the hashtag MCMFineArt on Instagram, I will do some reviews of some of your work later on down the road. So at this stage, my pencils are very sharp because I'm trying to go in and I'm adding little feathers and little marks and a lot of detail at this point. So you really want a nice sharp pencil. I prefer to use the Derwent Superpoint manual crank sharpener. It sharpens all three of these brands of pencils really beautiful into a really long, really sharp point. So this will help you control the pressure. You're not going to be pushing too hard because you'll be breaking the points, because you do have a nice sharp point, but you can get some really, really great fine details with these sharp pencils. Up until now, you really haven't needed them because you're just trying to get the color down. But now as we go in with all of those real minute little details, it's great to have those pencils really sharp. And I'll put the link in the description below for that sharpener. So this drawing took me a total of 3 hours and 5 minutes from my sketch to the finished product. I work a little faster than most people. I'm very familiar with this medium, so just don't worry about how long it took me. Just do a good job, spend enough time, put enough details in until you're happy with it. It might take you a little longer, or maybe it takes you a little shorter. It doesn't really matter. It's just I like to work until I feel like I have a really good detailed drawing, and when I feel like I'm going to overdo it, then I stop. But absolutely step away from it for a little bit if you need to. Put some fresh eyes back when you step back at it, and this might help you from getting too frustrated. But really just look back at your reference image at this point, see what values you need to tweak, see if you need to pop some highlights or add a new shadow, and then add those in, and you're going to be on your way. So it was pretty much about 2 hours into the drawing that I really started to pay attention to all my details. The first 2 hours were really just mapping out all of the values and getting that pastel on the paper. And now I spend about the last hour working on all those little minute details. So I've used a lot of different kind of pastel papers. I've used the Canson Mitance. I've used UArt. My favorite really is this Clairefontaine pastel matte paper. For me, there really is no substitute. It has a really heavy weight to it. It has a nice heavy tooth. It takes a lot of pastel, and you don't get a lot of that pastel dust blowing around. Now, I suggest when you're doing your pastel drawing that you have it on an easel so that the dust can just fall off the piece. Or you can use some compressed air to spray that off, or I just blow on it. But I'm using mine flat on a flat surface because it's easier for me to film for you guys when I have it down flat. And you can see there's not a ton of pastel dust blowing around because this paper is so wonderful and will just hold a lot of that in there. And it also helps when you kind of push that into the tooth of the paper too. From time to time, give it a good blend with your finger or with some soft tools, or you can use a cotton bud or a sponge, whatever works for you. But just know that this paper is really unmatched when it comes to using pastels. It's also really wonderful for colored pencil. It does take a little getting used to at first because it's so heavily textured, but way better than those regular papers that you're going to use, and a lot less dust flying around to muddy up your work. Now, when you're done doing your drawing, or you're done for the night or done for your time being, I suggest covering it up. And the reason for this is dust will fly on there, your colors can get muddied up. So put a glassine sheet or a piece of tracing paper on top when you're not working on it. And when you're done your drawing, you want to frame it behind glass. And this way nothing will settle on that, and your drawing will stay clean and beautiful for years to come. If you're not going to frame your piece right away, keep it covered, but you can also use a fixative. The thing I will caution about using a fixative is you want to make sure you use one that is specifically made for pastels. You don't want to use your graphite fixative or your charcoal fixative on your pastels. It will react with the binder material or some of the pigments, and the color can change and ruin your work. So when you use that fixative, make sure it is made specifically for pastels. You want to turn the can upside down, spray a couple sprays, and then do a really light coat on there. Let it dry, and then do several coats, letting it dry in between. And you shouldn't have any problem with spotting or color changing, that kind of thing. But just use it sparingly, and you don't really need it on this pastel matte paper if you go ahead and preserve it either in a nice acid-free paper envelope, or when you put it behind glass, it will be safe. I love using pastels for all my animal work. I think you can get a really high level of detail with all the fur and everything when you do animals in pastel. I will leave a link for the playlist of all my pastels, so you can check some of the other videos out. Some of them are shorter, some of them are longer, but it'll give you a good overview of, different things in pastel that you can do. Cardinals are really hardy birds. They do not migrate, so they'll stay permanent residents throughout the whole year. So if you live like in Connecticut where I live, we do get some really cold winters, and they can last through the winter. They last in colder climates just fine, and they are fine all year round in the summer heat as well as the winter cold. A cardinal will build its nest, but it will never use the same nest twice. So it will build a new nest each year. And they may take pieces of the old nest, but they always build a new nest for the coming new birds. This is a male cardinal. The females have less color. They tend to be a little bit more orangey or have a little bit of a tan color on them. And this is because they want to appeal to the females. So they are a brighter bird and they want to show them that they would be a good mate. A cardinal will have 1 or 2 broods a year, typically 2, and they will lay about 2 to 5 eggs each time they lay those eggs. It takes about 11 to 13 days from the time she lays them to the time that they hatch. And the baby cardinals are out of the nest in about 9 to 11 days. So from the time the mother cardinal lays the eggs till the babies are off on their own is less than 4 weeks. So she kicks them out of the nest once they're healthy enough, and that's a pretty quick process. The male cardinal is known for feeding the female cardinal beak to beak. It's part of their mating behavior, and it's sort of a bonding between the male and the female. And if you can catch them together, it's really a wonderful sight to see them. They're very amorous toward each other. If you want to attract cardinals to your yard, they love bird feeders and they love bird seed. So if you have a window feeder or a bird feeder on your property, you'll probably catch more cardinals up there than usual because they really love the bird seed. But they do have a balanced diet. So they are omnivorous, which means they eat both plants and animal foods. So cardinal birds eat fruits and buds as well as insects like beetles and caterpillars. And the cardinal parents mostly feed their chicks insects because it's a higher protein diet that helps them grow quickly. And since they're just out of the nest in 9 to 11 days, they need all the protein that they can get. A male cardinal will shift his weight from side to side while singing, doing a little dance and putting on a show to attract his female partner. And he'll usually spread out his feathers into a fan shape and lift his crest. And this is all for impressing the female cardinals. The males also help build the nests, so they will find all the building materials and bring it to the female who will actually build the nest. If you tried this tutorial, please leave me a comment. I'd love to know how you did with it. And consider subscribing to my channel. Leave me a thumbs up. It really helps me get more play on YouTube and gets my videos out to a broader audience. I really enjoy doing this for you guys, and I'd really love to hear from you. So take care. I'll see you on the next video, and happy art.